Sex trafficking is in fact modern-day slavery, in which children are bought and sold for sex. It happens right here in Georgia, from our urban areas to our rural areas. When we think of the perpetrators of this horrendous crime, pimps and traffickers immediately come to mind. But they're not the only ones responsible for the commercial sexual exploitation of our children. Purchasers are to blame too. We stand here today to proclaim the people who purchase children for sex are criminals too. I'm proud to announce the launch of a new statewide campaign entitled Georgia's Not Buying It, which will specifically target the demand side of sex trafficking. The campaign is a public-private partnership with law enforcement, Street Grace, Youth Spark, and the Governor's Office of Children and Families. I want to thank Cheryl DeLuca Johnson and her team from Street Grace, Jennifer Swain from Youth Spark for their leadership in this effort. Their expertise and advice has been invaluable as we developed the campaign. It's because of Street Grace, Youth Spark, other advocacy groups, and all of you here that we have reached this point. The road has not been easy. It has taken countless hours of education and persistence to convince the public that sex trafficking of children is real and must be stopped. Cheryl and Jennifer tell me that only a few years ago it was unimaginable that we would have a campaign to deal with demand. Due to their tireless efforts and their nonprofits' efforts, sex trafficking is no longer a taboo subject. They've spent years raising awareness so that we can talk about ending this human rights crisis. We'll continue to go after the pimps and rescue the victims, but we know that the only way to truly eradicate this evil is by ending the demand. So with this campaign, we're sending a message to those who purchase children for sex. Your secret is out, and we will no longer stand for such activity.
There are children, young girls and young boys, that wake up every day and they think about what their day is going to be like. They should be thinking about going to school and making good grades, about what sports or what team they play on, what church, what youth group activity they've got to do that day, what mom and daddy are going to fix them for supper, and that they should be safe and secure. But the kids that we're here to talk to you about today worry about terrible things. They worry about things like, how many strange men am I going to have sex with today? Will my pimp beat me? Will my pimp give me drugs or alcohol to keep me addicted to this lifestyle? How long will I be in this location before I go to another state? And will I ever see my family again? These are the terrible, awful things mostly young girls worry about. I recently attended a very good training sponsored by our Attorney General Sam Olens concerning the crime of human trafficking with an emphasis on sex trafficking. And one of the things we learned are the terrible ways that these pimps control these young women and keep them in this life. We had an example given to us of a young lady that was stripped naked by her pimp and locked in a room with a pit bull. We had another example given to us of another young lady that, because she wasn't obeying and doing what her pimp wanted her to do, was stripped naked, beat, and locked in a trunk. It's called trunking. And they ride around with them for 2 or 3 days, let them get dehydrated, sick, almost die. And then they'll do what they're supposed to do. Ladies and gentlemen, sex trafficking is a crime in the state of Georgia. It's about force, it's about coercion, and it's about control. And if you see a young person that you suspect is trapped in this circumstance, then you need to report it. And let us get that young person out of that life. And then let us give the pimps and the men who buy sex from these children something to worry about. Help us get the message out that Georgia's not buying it.
I expect that many of you here today are parents. And whether our child is 2 or 22, I think we all know that our instinct is to protect our children, to shield them from the cruelties of the world. But there are children out there who are not being protected from the cruelties of the world by their parents. Instead, they're being bought and sold for sex. Our office is determined to go after those who are predators and who are preying on our children here. In the last 2 years alone, we've brought over 15 cases of child sex trafficking, some where the victims are as young as 12. These children are being bought and sold by predators that includes obviously the traffickers, but also includes the men who are buying children for sex. These men are just as responsible as the traffickers. And you know, they'll always have lots of explanations. And it'll be either that the girls didn't seem to them to actually be unhappy, they seem to be enjoying this, they're being taken care of by their pimps, that they're really very streetwise for their age, or most commonly, that they didn't realize that this girl was a juvenile, that they thought that she was 18 years old. Now, as with any other significant public safety problem, as important as aggressive prosecution is, we are not going to prosecute our way out of a child sex trafficking problem here in Georgia. In addition to prosecuting trafficking cases, we need to do everything that we can to try to stop it from happening to begin with. And one of those ways is to try to get these would-be Johns to stop and think. This could be their daughter. This is somebody's daughter. And if that doesn't stop them, they should know that everybody who's here today, from legislators and community outreach organizations to our fellow state prosecutors and fellow federal prosecutors, all of us are committed to doing everything we can to finding them and to sending them to prison for a very long time.
I can't speak from a law enforcement standpoint. I'm not a lawmaker. I can speak to you only as a father and a husband. And I've learned a lot about this issue through my wife, who's been the executive director and now the CEO of Street Grace. And the more you learn, the madder you get, and the more questions you have about what you can do. I used to wear, and still do on occasion, Street Grace t-shirts that say, "Stop sexual exploitation of children," something of the ilk. And I can't tell you how many times I've been at a concession stand at one of my kids' games and somebody sees the shirt and looks down and they're uncomfortable. Well, they're not the uncomfortable ones. What I love about what I'm hearing here in stories like Leigh, there's nobody sugarcoating this. And that's the way it used to be. It used to be, no, don't even mention it. Well, we can't have that. And as a man, we need to stand up. We need to be the guy who knows that the guy I go on the road with, who takes a business trip with me, he's into this. We need to be the men who stand up and say, no, stop. We need to be the dads who pour into our sons, respect women. Don't use them. There's enough of this false masculinity going around. That somehow this makes you more of a man, when actually it makes you less of one. We have to stand up as dads and as husbands and look people in the eye and say, no more. George is not buying it. You see PSAs all the time with athletes from around Atlanta. And they get involved, and I love that about pro sports in Atlanta. And a lot of times it's childhood diseases or something. Hey, please support us, help us fight this. And it's a no-brainer, of course you're going to do that. It takes guts to stand up for an argument and a cause like this. It takes guts to say, oh, they want me to do what? Talk about sex trafficking? It takes guts to say, yeah, I'll be on TV talking about that. That's what Tim Hudson of the Braves did. That's what Harry Douglas of the Falcons did. That's what Devin Harris of the Atlanta Hawks did. They stood up and pretty much looked men in the eye and said, listen to me, I'm going to stand up and fight this. The result is a public service announcement that will begin running, and I couldn't be prouder to be part of what you're about to see.
It's more real than you know.
It's happening all around us, and Georgia is no exception.
The youngest, most trusting members of our state
are falling victim to sexual exploitation and trafficking.
It's time that criminals who purchase sex from children know that the secret is out.
And Georgia's not going to stand for it.
It just takes ordinary people being informed,
standing up,
and making a statement.
So when you tell me you didn't know,
we're not buying it.
Georgia's not buying it. For more information on how you can make a difference, go to ganotbuyingit.org.